Hey.
That worked.
Okay.
But we're late.
Right.
16:20, 16:22.
Oh, I should get started.
Wait a minute. What are you doing? You're looking about packets.
No, in the garden of friends. Start at 6 and then we should get started.
Well, we can't see because Natasha's not quite back yet. This is Tsvwg. If you're hoping for something else, then stay anyway. It's going to be chaired by me and Martin. David isn't able to make the meeting. We'll hopefully have David back for the next meeting. Is the audio working?
The noise from the hall is louder than yours.
Well, go and get some more people.
You moving noise to sing. Oh.
This is the IETF Note Well, and if you haven't read this, please read it. All contributions to the working group today will be covered by the IETF Note Well. If you don't intend to do that, just leave the room, join those people outside. But please read it. Agenda for today. The agenda's been bashed slightly, and so we'll just go through the agenda. We've got the ECN encapsulation guidelines by Bob. Is Bob here? Oh, okay. DiffServ and IEEE 802.11. Another presentation requested by Bob on L4S and its use of code points. We're not having a presentation on tunnel ECN. The authors aren't present at this meeting and they didn't think it was worth doing a remote presentation. So we'll have an update from that later. And then finally, we're going to look at TCP alternative backoff with ECN. This draft was previously discussed in TCPM and ICCRG, and it's here because this might be the correct home for actually progressing the draft. So this is the current agenda. Does anybody have comments on the agenda? Ooh, Tim's doing the noise reduction, that should help. We don't have Bob? Fred, do you like to do the first talk? Yeah. You can say, well, for this slide, it's not going to make that much difference, is it?
Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so at the last IETF meeting, we went through the services that are discussed in RFC 4594 and in this draft, which basically duplicates those services, and had a fair discussion and walked away basically understanding that the working group was saying that they were fine with the services that we offered. And then the chair of, which working group does she chair? The chair of the right working group, whatever it was, came up and said, oh, by the way, you didn't reference my RFC or our RFC. And by the way, our diff-serve code points and services are all different. So could you please do something about that? So Tim and I went in and did a fair bit of analysis, looked at that RFC pretty hard, and she's right. The services are all different. It's an overlapping set of code points. Normalizing the thing in this specification is just plain hard. So what we wound up doing was we inserted a paragraph, which you can read here if you have a microscope, that says in a nutshell, yes, there is this other RFC. We don't know how to normalize it. And so we think that a user of this RFC and of RFC 4594 and the entire diff-serve set of services that it's based on that needs to talk to a GSMA system is going to have to do DSCP translation at that boundary, which is described in the diff-serve architecture. It's how you handle different diff-serve domains. And sorry, they're different diff-serve domains, and you translate at that point. And did I say anything more there? No, that's literally what I said. And that's the end of my presentation. So, so my question I have two questions for the working group. One of them is that okay? Are you guys okay with that outcome with respect to RFC 7561? Yes, no, indifferent?
We can take comments if anybody's got comments. We can also, of course, take some
we could probably, for the people that are here, we could probably hum.
On what? On
my question.
On what?
Are you okay with that?
Or on this? Well, yeah, okay. If we need people to comment if they've looked at this.
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at this and have opinions on this particular paragraph? The draft's been around for a while and we just added an extra paragraph, so I guess we need eyeballs on it.
Yeah, so obviously we're welcoming comments.
We'll take comments on the list if people don't have comments now.
Fine, that works for me. Now, do you want to go through the working group draft question or wait for the comments?
No, I want to go whether we wish to adopt this.
Okay, so second question is, do we want to adopt this?
Does anybody want to talk about the adoption question? If anyone comes to the mic, they can say things. If not, we're going to take a hum.
You're allowed to bring eggs to the mic. Throw them in. Okay.
Okay, Fred. We're going to take a hum. Please, we're going to ask for 2 hums. The first hum will be, please hum when I say if you think we should adopt this as a TSVWG working item. And the draft is not on the list. So if you want the 802.11 mappings for diff server adopted as a working group item, please hum now. Okay, I hear hums. Please hum when I ask if you think this should not be adopted by this working group at this time for any reason. If you have any reason not to adopt it, please hum now. I hear no hums against adopting this. Therefore, I shall take this to the working group list with the recommendation that we consider adoption. The document will, and the document will then require reviewers. So, because this document's been a simple mapping, which we've talked about before, so while we're going to call for adoption, we're also going to ask for people who might be willing to review this. Okay. Did anyone see Bob out in the corridor? Okay, so Bob misses his 2 meeting slots at the moment. Next up will be Abe. Which is this? So this draft has been presented in before, and it's brought here because there was discussion with our ADs about where the best place might be to form a discussion on this draft. And since it's an update to RFC 3168, which is a RFC maintained by this working group, they invited the authors to come here. I'm an author, but I'm just chairing at the moment. Michael's going to do the talk. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, so the context of that is the following sentence from 3168. It gives the context. It says that end systems should react to congestion at most once per window of data, most once per round trip time. So this is not something we're criticizing or changing or anything. The point is that this is a specific context that RFC 3168 sets. There are other proposals in the space of using ECN, and this is not about them. It's about this context. Next. There is the problematic text. There is there are 2 separate paragraphs in 2 different places. Second one is easy to miss. We missed it in the previous version of the draft, also in our conversation. So, but I've seen it before. The first text says that the indication of congestion should be treated just as a congestion loss in a non-ECN capable TCP. And this means halving the congestion window. That's using a lowercase should, but it seems to be a clear recommendation. But there is also another text that says upon the receipt of an ECN capable transport of a single CE packet, by such a transport, the congestion control algorithm followed that the end systems must be essentially the same as the congestion control response to a single drop packet. Essentially the same, I think from the other context, it's clear that this means halving. For example, for ECN capable TCP, the source TCP is required to have its congestion windows. It's also explained here for any window of data containing either a packet drop or an ECN indication. Next. So the issue here is that this rule creates poor link utilization whenever we use small queues. When you ECN mark at a point in the queue, or even if it's the same point as loss, when you do that at a point that is way below the bandwidth delay product, you produce small utilization with this. In particular with modern AQM algorithms, I think this is not what we want. And this rule prevents us from utilizing the knowledge that ECN gives us, which is that we actually have an indicator here that the queue is not necessarily a bandwidth delay product. So therefore, we think this rule is harmful. Next. So there is this draft that Corey has already briefly introduced. It was the most recent version is called Draft Academia Alternative Backoff ECN 03. This draft was presented in TCPM in IETF Prague and Yokohama. It was then later discussed in ICCRG. It changes the sender reaction to ECN, and it proposes new language for this RFC 3168. This combination turned out not to be good, so we plan as a next step to split the draft into a PS update to RFC 3168 that just fixes these statements that I showed you, and a short draft to recommend an appropriate congestion response. Now, the first thing is underlined. This means this talk here is just about this first draft. Next. So the question I'm asking is whether this working group whether there is energy and interest in this working group in adopting an upcoming proposed standard draft that would just update the text of RFC 3168 to no longer recommend that you would have, or like you would react just like you would react to loss when you get an ECN mark. Questions, comments?
Questions?
Hi, Bob Briscoe, and apologies for being late because I think I've missed a slot I was meant to be talking in, but answering your question, would you be opposed to adding a bit more stuff in here to update RFC 3168 as well? I know I've been talking with Praveen about some of the control packets that have to not be ECN capable and things like that, and now there's some work needs to be done before that they were allowed to be ECN capable, but it would maybe better to pile more things into one update than have lots of little updates. I don't know, but then it would hold back your one. You know.
I guess my answer depends on how much it is and what it is, and we should put that case by case. Not in principle opposed.
We can talk about it then.
Yeah.
I'll put my chair hat on rather than my author hat for that one, and just say that if the working group adopts this, then of course the working group will have consensus about what goes in, but we don't really want to add feature after feature to this. Eventually that document's going to have to be updated and probably a BIS issued. So we want to try and keep it well focused. But if there's something pressing that the working group really feels should be changed because it's wrong, then we should do all the corrections.
On 3168.
3168.
5161, 9847.
Don't.
Hi, Brian Trammell. Yay. Just a clarifying question. I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're trying to do with that PS update. You're basically just removing those restrictions so
Yes.
that other things can be done in the informational or experimental, the other document.
Yes.
What's your plan for the other document? Is informational at this point or experimental?
Not informational.
Okay.
Experimental, probably.
Cool. Yes, then do it. I think it's pretty easy to get done. I would be skeptical of trying to say, oh, well, we only get to update 3168 every n moons, and we have to throw all of the stuff in there. This is not an IETF process document. I think it's a pretty easy slam dunk to just get the thing done. So I'm definitely in support of.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Eric, not Mark. This sounds useful, but I didn't quite understand why you need to split them into separate documents, as opposed to having the PS update the PS, as well as having non-normative text saying, well, here's a possible algorithm that satisfies the above constraints. Right?
We do this by advice from the ADs.
Okay. They wanted to
I think so. There's one standing behind you. He can like that. You can probably say what do you think is a good or bad idea, or why it's, you know.
Because as an implementer, it's easier if it's one document that says, oh, you know, go find it things in one place, right?
Eric, just to be clear on the document contents before Eric, while the AD composes what he's going to say, it's a parameter, not an algorithm. So the update, it proposes to allow a range of parameters, and then the specific one is to choose a parameter which they think is safe, a number, a single number.
Right.
So Martin Stiemerling, you're AD for the next 2 hours, and then I'm gone anyway. Now, but the process-wise, it's better if you have two documents, because one is proposing the change to ECN, and the other one is meant to be experimental in the first place to figure out if it really works on the wide scale as intended. and now I'm Dave Ted, at least I'm a proxy for him because he's in Jabber, and he was writing in Jabber that he would like loss plus ECN markets in one RTT to be discussed in this document.
More ECN marks
Yes.
in one
Yes.
RTT. Is that sorry, was it more ECN marks in one RTT? Okay. Okay, but that's not what we're suggesting to change. That's a different, yeah.
Marco Koyo, I wonder if there is enough experimentation to make it proposed standard immediately.
I didn't understand that. Sorry, could you speak up?
I wonder if there is enough experimentation to make it proposed standard immediately.
If there is enough experimentation to make a proposal with other values than 0.5, is that what you're...
I mean, there are several things that may go wrong. First of all, when you are now using flight size, as we are using for the loss-based, it works correctly when you are in congestion avoidance. But when you are in fast recovery, there after the first round trip, you should still reduce the congestion window if you get the ECN echo, right?
Yeah.
But during the fast recovery, flight size is a random number. It doesn't reflect correctly the current flight size. That's one thing. So the 3168 was very careful making this correct. Because when you are using congestion window during the fast recovery, everything works fine. Okay. And second, second thing is when you have small window, so sub 6 MSS window, you are practically not necessarily reducing every round trip the window when you get the ECN echo, because minus 15% doesn't mean necessarily full MSS. So you practically won't be reducing your window each round trip as you should.
Can I get clarification on what are you saying there should be a reduction of at least 1 MSS? Is that last?
Something like that, I believe. So there are things like that which deserve some experimentation before going PS, in my opinion.
And you think we can get experimental evidence for this, or you think we have to use our engineering judgment?
Right.
Is the reduction by 1 MSS something that we can do experimentally, or something for which we need engineering judgment? So I can see the logic of discussing this.
I believe you can do it.
Okay, so there are two ways we pick a algorithm. One, because we judge it to be safe, and the other because we can measure it and we can know that it is safe. It seems that there might be at least a case for discussing a 1 MSS reduction as an engineering decision, because we consider as a working group that that's a safe thing to do, without necessarily doing an experimentation to confirm it, because we understand how the congestion behavior works. So I'm asking, did you feel that to verify that choice, you would actually need experimental results, or whether we perhaps could make engineering decisions? What was your feeling?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but possibly engineering decision is enough. Yeah, because at least I believe I can figure out what happens if you do it in a correct way. But there are certain cases that should be very carefully designed. So the current text is not enough. That's the point.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question. Is this what you propose? Is it specific to the reduction to the reaction to ECN, or would this also apply to a loss signal?
Partly, yes. So this small reaction with small windows, it's the same thing with the loss-based, but during the fast recovery, it's different. Loss-based recovery handles this correctly. There is no problem.
Okay. So, okay, this is one of the good things about bringing things to the IETF. You can get discussion on topics, and it's good to receive comments. This is as a chair speaking still. What we need to do is decide whether this is the correct home for doing this activity, and whether we should do it. So is there anyone who wants to speak on, again, on whether we should do this as an activity or whether we should avoid doing this?
Bob Briscoe. Just going back to the history of when RFC 3168 was written and why it was written like it was. At the time, there was great concern that if different TCPs responded to ECN differently from loss, that it would create a safety problem, if you like. You know, that there'd be people stretching the numbers further and further, if you like. And so, I mean, I'm fairly well known for not worrying too much about rate fairness, but the difficulty of getting together some text that allows us to allow a bit of leeway but not too much is going to be difficult, is all I'm saying. You know, the idea of just having one number, I'm not sure is the right idea, because that's a bit too specific. You know,
So, try and summarize that. That's what the bottom line on this slide says then, which is find some text to set some bounds, make the appropriate relaxation, but don't set the number in this PS.
Right. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying is okay? As a process?
I'm not saying anything's okay or not okay. I'm just saying I haven't thought how you would write this text in such a way that it would be clear enough and confined enough, but also flexible enough. You know.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's why we have working groups to do this work. Okay, we'll take more comments. While we're taking comments, I'll make a procedural note. We can't adopt a draft that isn't actually on the table, so we won't be doing an adoption call today. So we're just doing a discussion prior to, in the future, a new draft appearing and then an adoption call. But we have a working group meeting here where we might have opinions, so please come to the mic if you have opinions.
So we get to be picky in the work group meeting? Okay. So I do have one question, and that is that I believe that IETF 94, you had what amounted to a barb off, and we're discussing an alternative back off proposal. And I walked away from that. I wasn't actually able to attend. I had a conflicting thing. But I walked away from it with the idea that you had some intellectual property. Do you? Well, somebody has some intellectual property. Somebody has, is there? And what is the status of that?
Bob, if we have a discussion, it needs to be on a mic.
Yep. I'm not sure why it's relevant to this, but the status is it's not been declared yet.
It's not been declared yet, and that's actually okay. I assume a declaration is coming at some point. But is that going to be an issue? Are we going to be tripping over ourselves with that?
No, not an issue for what Michael's trying to do here at all. Right, that's fine.
So actually, Michael, can you go to the next slide?
Next.
Because we have the actual text.
Place?
Oh.
That was the previous slide.
Oh, is there?
We have
that. Yeah, the draft.
That was an extra slide. Do you want to show that, Michael?
It's a backup slide.
No, just show it up real quick. So there's text and then make it go away. Because I actually, so I've actually had a look at it and
okay, go on then.
Well, but yeah, I don't. No. I really don't.
If you
want
it,
I really don't want to have the debate about this text yet. I want to say that we're going to adopt it first. I want to say now that I've actually seen the text, this is a good start. I think we can quibble about the numbers a little bit. I'd want to talk to you offline about like where the numbers came from. I think there's number quibbling to be done here, but that should happen within the working group. And unless the new area directors are going to make a reorganizational change to where the ECN stuff lives, then this would be the working group for it, right? So this is the ECN maintenance and minor extensions working group.
This is traditionally the ECN working group.
Right.
So. Okay.
I'm just trying to answer both the questions.
So no, that's fine, Brian. I'm keen on people quibbling with stuff and making comments here because it indicates some energy to actually do the work that needs to be done to get that text just right. So that's good.
Do you want me to start quibbling on the text?
No.
Right now? Okay.
Mira.
Mia Kulevin. So I'm not super sure how the text should look like. This is not.
It's gone.
I don't want to go into details, but I'm just saying it's not that easy to get it right. Not sure how right we can get it. Yeah, so I agree to Bob here. The other question is, do we need to update the draft? And I agree that what's written in the draft is extremely confusing and should not have been written that way. But I still don't know if you need to update the draft because it's still written in a way where it actually kind of could be okay to do what you want to do.
Update which draft?
Sorry, not draft, the RFC.
Ah, okay. Well,
because like I mean,
the RFC takes a must, which
now you
is
have
pretty difficult to get around.
The wrong slide. Take the other one.
Oh, which one do you want? This?
Yeah. The next one, yeah. So I don't want to be picky, but there's this essentially, right? And just, changing a number from 0.5 to 0.7 might still essentially be the same reaction or whatever. I don't know.
Well, okay.
I'm just, I didn't say this as an ID. I'm just saying, I understand that it would be nice to clean it up, but I'm not sure how correct we can get it, and so I'm not sure if the update is needed, but I'm just unsure.
There's Mira, unsure. Okay, so right, okay, so now I have to think as a working group chair what I'm recommending. What I'm recommending is at least people have opinions on this, which is good news. I would personally encourage that we try and find a document that clarifies this point, because we're going to be working on ECN in various forms as things go forward. We keep advocating the use of ECN. I've always had a lurking concern that if we do this, then we have to be clear about what 3168 says. So I would encourage you to resubmit the draft and then go to the working group and ask if they can adopt it here as a work item to work upon. And if you're doing that, please do split out the second document, because we shouldn't be discussing the number while we're trying to get that. We could make 2 documents, bring it to the working group, and then let's talk about it.
Yeah, so that's actually a good thing. I think if we can come up with a text that actually everybody can agree to and that totally makes sense at the end, then why not updating it, right? But like even, and I think we should work on this. So that's something I'm sure about. And the point is, even if we adopt the document and then we cannot come to a text that actually makes sense, we don't have to update it. It's like only if we actually can find something that makes sense we have to.
It becomes an AD problem then at some point. We have to decide what to do with the work item. But for the moment, that's the plan. Let's make 2 drafts and bring it to the working group and see if there's energy.
Yeah, in this case, I would like to have more discussion before we add a milestone.
You would like what?
To have more discussion on the actual text before we add a milestone.
Is that Mira as Mira, or is that Mira as a support yellow dot? Or?
No. This is my personal opinion here.
I'm not sure what that means. Do you understand what that means? Confused.
So I would say just write the draft, submit it to the group, and figure out what's going, and then we can see how it ends up.
It was just because Gori was saying the word milestone. That was why I was coming back.
Just do it, I would say.
Right. Okay, so you have an action. When can you do it for, Michael? When can you do it for? When are you going to revise the draft? I always ask this. I mean, is it in the next month?
Yeah, something like that. Is that good enough?
Is that 2 months? I mean, give me a number.
1 to 2.
1 to 2, fine, thank you.
1.5.
Right, fine. Okay, so we've reached the end of our agenda, but we didn't get Bob scheduled, so we need to go back and schedule Bob. Bob, would you like to talk about the ECN tunnel draft? No, ECN overlay 2. Which is this? That's fine.
Right. So this is myself, John, and Pat. Been around a long time. I think is it on? Hello. Oh, is it? Okay.
Here, that's the only thing.
Right. And next slide. So the purpose is to give guidelines to protocol designers at layer 2 and tunnel protocol designers on how to ensure ECN is correctly put into their design and deployed cross-layer. And we've also been doing some liaisons with other groups that are designing layer 2 protocols and systems with layering in them to catch any systematic layering problems with ECN. And we've done one with the IEEE that's completed, and it's very easy. And 3GPP is ongoing, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Other recent, well, so the activity on the 3GPP one, we had a response to our liaison to them in December. They identified, we asked them to identify working groups and specs that referenced ECN. They identified 6 working groups, and I'll put the abbreviations there for those of you that don't know 3GPP speak, and 20 specs that reference ECN, IEC 3168, or a lot also reference 6679, which is ECN in RTP. And so the next bit of activity was we, and that means me, read them all 20 really big specs. Right? Strictly, I searched for the word ECN and explicit and various other things. Prepared a draft response, but I haven't given it to the chairs yet. That's me and John Kapili-Mamil, who works in the 3GPP. So I've got another slide on that. The other recent activity related to this draft is related to another layer 2 protocol, Trill. The presentation earlier this week on that. And that's actually redesigning ECN support in Trill because they've changed Trill. And finally, there's been some discussion on how to update a large number of proposed standard control specs. So that's what I'm going to talk about. A couple of slides on the first one and one on each on the last. The 3GPP liaison context, don't expect to be able to read that. Essentially it says, we believe there could be problems here. It looks like you've not maybe fully understood RFC 3168. And that's not surprising. We're talking about RFC 3168 again, that we've already said is quite unclear and just got bigger and bigger. The context that we're talking about here is mostly about, you can see that tiny text, but the eNodeB or the base station, which is a layer 2 device, and GTP tunneled information comes in and it goes out PDCP, which is packet data something convergence protocol or something like that. So anyway, next slide. These are all the specs I read. Most of them are about 200 pages. Yeah. And the bold ones are normative, or they mention ECN normatively. And bearing in mind 3GPP normative rules are different from IETF. And the italic ones, the bold italic ones, sorry, the normative ones were the ones that we were told mentioned ECN normatively, and the italic ones are ones I found some normative ECN text in them, but we weren't told. Yeah, okay, so it may be a difference in my definition of normative to yours, but they might have some shoulds. I don't know whether that's considered normative, but I think it is. Anyway, top level summary of all that. Nearly all of those are about ECN in RTP, UDP, and all of that stuff seemed fine. It just made me realize just how complicated the mobile network is, how many boxes have to say, yes, we understand ECN before ECN is going to do anything. But the ones that seem to be more problematic are the radio access network ones, which are the last two on the second column, which I've got another slide on, and also to a certain extent the third one at the top there, 23401 on GPRS. But otherwise, everything else layer 4 and above seems to be fine. Next. So the text in the RAN ones, UTRAN and the Evolve UTRA, is there. I've shown this text last time, but we didn't want to do anything about it. We didn't want to talk to the 3G people about it until we'd found maybe there was some other text that qualified it or something like that. But now I've seen them all. I think this is a bit deficient. Two problems with it. The first is it's talking about reading and writing the ECT code point on a node that isn't or doesn't appear to be IP aware. If you went back to that layering diagram I showed earlier, it's a layer 2 or at least a under IP node. So I think it needs to be clearer what it means when a eNodeB is reading and writing the IP header. And secondly, the marking behavior, not just the protocol mechanisms, but the behavior is very unclear. And I think that highlights a difficulty in understanding 3168 as much as, where as much to blame, if you like. So next.
Yeah, so maybe this is the reason why we're trying to write this document, in fact. Yeah, so it's not really a criticism.
Yes. So there's repeated that diagram again, showing the layers coming across from the packet gateway, serving gateway, eNodeB, the user equipment. And I've highlighted here some of the protocols going on. So firstly, there doesn't seem to be any spec anywhere that refers to RFC 6040, which says how ECN gets propagated in tunnels. And there must be tunnel nodes to have all this GTP stuff going on that ought to, I mean, given the level of detail at which RTP has been specified for all the middle boxes to get it right, I would imagine also that the tunnel endpoints have to refer to RFC 6040. But that, again, that's our fault, because RFC 6040 isn't clear that it covers GTP, and that's going to be on the last slide. Secondly, it talks about the PDCP header, which implies that it's only thinking in the downstream direction, in the downlink direction, but there's presumably also potential for congestion in the upstream when it would be writing into GTP header at the eNodeB. Then when it says ECN code points in the PDCP SDUs, which are, I think it must mean the ECN header inside that. I don't think PDCP has got any ECN header. Anyone care to say I'm wrong, but I don't think it has. And so, there's these questions of how does it know that, particularly because there may be robust header compression, especially when this is a voice service. So the IP header inside may not have an immediately obvious 2-bit ECN field because it may be compressed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how anyone could implement this.
So at least in theory, some of the ROC modes will transport those bits, but they won't be visible because they'll be ROC compressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will put this into a formal liaison because that seems to be problems there. It may mean that no one can implement this, or that they'll be into non-interoperable implementations of it, or whatever. It doesn't seem enough. Okay. Does anyone want to speak on that before I move on to Trell and stuff?
So Martin Stiemling speaking as an individual. So I'm not a 3GPP radio expert, but I assume that the ROC compression is just happening on the radio part, from the eNodeB to the terminal. Yeah. And that the eNodeB can, let's say, he's doing the compression and decompression, so he sees the bits. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right in interpreting, saying that the PDCP SDU is the userland IP header you just seen action, which is strangely described, but I think that's the reading.
I'm Georg Meyer. I'm the liaison responsible from 3GPP towards IETF.
I'm also not a radio guy, so I can't help you with that, but I want to say thank you very much for the great work you did and for even opening that specs, like 23 or whatever that was. So that's really impressive, and thanks a lot, and I hope we get this rolling, and we can maybe talk offline then how to best push this into the right working groups. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Kevin Smith, Vodafone. Thanks, Bob. I think I agree. This is great work. We talked about ECN. Could this also scale to things like Connex, for example?
Would have potentially the same issues, yes.
Yeah. So could the work be made a bit more generic, so to speak, to say, well, it's not just the ECN code point that others we should be getting access to?
For this draft, it's been around so long, I'd rather not extend its scope, because I think we're about to publish it, so I wouldn't want to do that. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, we could take some of the thinking maybe within 3GPP. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Right. There is one more slide, sorry, about 3GPP, which is about the marking area. I brought up something last time, so I won't dwell on it, but it's that it talks about marking and congestion as if it's a sort of on-off state, and it gives the implication that it will then start setting the CE bit all the time, and then when the congestion finished, it will turn it off. It's not absolutely clear, but if the codecs are expecting that, and that's what they respond to, if you get some congestion in a non-3GPP network outside, it's going to not be doing that. And so the codec's got to be able to deal with both, or we have to standardize one behavior, which I think it'd be best to standardize the more randomized behavior that is normally in an AQM. But I don't exactly know what was intended or what anyone's implemented. So that's a bit more of a difficult issue, because I know the 3GPP probably doesn't want to standardize too much about behavior.
I think we've seen these issues talked about before, so the important thing is to call this out and also to reply to them and see what the feedback is.
And there's some detailed text there about behavior, but it's more about constraints on a behavior that doesn't seem to be specified anyway. But it may be somewhere and I haven't found it yet. Right, next.
Okay, Trill.
Right, Trill. The only reason I'm bringing this up, because this could be quite independent, but before we put the draft, I think that the draft itself is nearly ready for working group last call. But we had an idea on how to do ECN support in Trill that it'd be worth putting into the draft as a more general case, because there's a list of ideas of how to support ECN in there, and the way we're doing in Trill is well, put it this way: when we presented it this morning, the chair said, "This is really cool. It's a really easy, neat way of doing it. It's Tsvwg." And the reason it's cool is because Trill has been properly designed for forward compatibility for things that come along later, and it's made it really easy to do. Right? It's not yet in that draft, but we'll be writing it into that draft within the next 1.5 months, I believe, is the current fashion. So when it's on 0.1, you see the idea where we can go to the slides for the session earlier. Right, next is updating tunnel specs, and this is a more process question. We asked this on the list, and David Black gave me a reply, and so I'm going to keep asking until I get the reply I want. The problem is that when RFC 6040 was written, and I wrote it, but obviously we all wrote it in the end, it said that its scope was about IP and IP tunnels, and it didn't cater for the case where you've got an IP and IP tunnel with a shim in between, which can't exist independently. So it has to be put on by the same node as the IP header, because it's definitely a shim, it's not a header. And all we really needed to do was just extend the scope just a little bit to cover all those cases, and we didn't. So I'd like to update that as a proposed standard, but what we're talking about here is a BCP, and I don't think, well, David Black said that AD advice says that a BCP can update a proposed standard with an AD's approval. Is that correct?
Probably, but let's not. We're not having that discussion here. So you just tell us what you think, and then we'll go away and discuss. It doesn't work to work on one chair versus another.
We put through take this BCP, put it in another draft, say that's going to be a proposed standard as a bit for 64. I think would be a lot better way to vote. Okay. And also, for anyone wanting to implement 60/40, they don't have to read this massive long ECN encapsulation draft just to find this one section.
I think we need to be very clear about tunnels in general, because there's a growing number of them, and we've got to offer good advice to people making them. I'd personally love us to stop creating new tunnels to keep doing things, but I can't predict the future, and I suspect people will still find new uses for new tunnels. And the man who's talking about tunnels is at the mic. Hello, Mr. Tunnels.
Eric, I'm Mark. I just heard about the new one. It's IP over UDP. It came up this week. So we're getting better at creating them faster, as far as I can tell. But whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, yeah, up to you. I think being able to capture sort of a paragraph saying this is the behavior we would want, right, and having that be fairly condensed, and then we can figure out how to distribute it. Because some of the particular one, I saw VXLAN on the spec, right? So that's not a product of the IETF. And so that particular RFC is a bit tricky, right? In terms of, we can have some other document that refers to it saying, if you do doing VXLAN, could you please do this? And we'll make sure it goes into the current set of NVO3 drafts, VXLAN, GPE, etc., GNU, right? GUI, but in the current work, but that one, because it's just informational and independent, whatever.
So the way to get around that, and I haven't got it with VXLAN, but I'll put the note there for the GTP one, which is also not out yet, is that when I spoke to 3GP people about this, they said, well, we can't write a spec about this because you're talking about the behavior of jumping from one IP header to another, and IP is the IETFs. And GTP is between them. And it's the question of not who owns the protocol, who owns the machine that does the process. Because the machine is putting a GTP and then an IP header. So I think the way around this is for us to say, when there's an IP header and an IP header, even if there's a shim in between, this is how you propagate information between them. And then 3GPP or VXLAN can refer to that.
Sure, yes. And that, well, I don't know about BCP versus PS, but to me that sounds like this is protocol behavior that we could standardize, right? And where you apply it is a separate matter, but yes.
So, Bob, without prejudicing my options, would you be willing to write an internet draft which just captures this particular bit of tunnel design thing as a separate document? And then we can figure out who should read this and how we should capture it. Maybe some of it should go into the design team activity in the routing area. Maybe it should be copied, maybe it should be referenced, maybe it should be a separate document. I don't know, but having it as a separate piece of text to start with would be a really good thing.
Yeah, and then we could add references to it from other places and make people aware of it. And if it's a page to read or whatever, right, it should be easy.
Essentially, most people who are building these things are assuming that RFC 6040 applies to them, and it just clarifies that it does apply.
Yeah.
That's it, I think.
Okay, you want to do next steps?
So I will give you a response to the liaison, and that will go through the approval process, presumably. We, the co-authors, will help you with that. There's a couple of ECN NCAP edits to do, and you've just asked me to do that as a new draft. First sub-bullet there, and the second one I'll just add control for technique, and then I'd like to see if we can get that shot off for a working group last call or something. I think it's been around enough, hasn't it? And we've got a few reviews done of it.
Yeah. I'm thinking about whether and how we know we got to working group last call status when we're trying to inform people in other places about what's going on. I mean, if we knew that the advice was being taken well and they were understanding it, then that would make me feel immediately jump to, let's go for a working group last call. Although this is a bit of a unidirectional pipe sometimes, so we can offer the advice and we don't actually require a response. So let's, well, bearing that in mind, ask again when you've done the edits. Anybody got any questions about the draft apart from what we've taken interactively? The intention was always to get this thing published so that other people would start designing things in the way we thought they should be designed, as in TSVWG. So this is advice to the community on how to use ECN in places where people might get it perhaps wrong if they didn't actually think about it carefully. And my guess is you've captured most of that, so please read this draft. We'd love to see comments on the list. We'd love to see notes that you've read it, and that will help us figure out whether we're at a working group last call position. How long, Bob? For the various things you've now promised, and I'll make notes. You don't have to be over ambitious, just tell me real numbers. 1.5 months for everything. It's a new standard. Okay. Good, 1.5 months, okay. Right. When does the session end?
In 4 minutes.
So you have 4 minutes and you have a presentation.
Right. This is about bringing modification of ECN semantics for this ultra-low query delay thing we're doing called L4S, low latency, low loss, scalable service nets. You may have seen, just so you know which thing in your memory to recall for this, you may have seen a demonstration prior to this. Very low delay. There's a URL there to look at the video if you didn't see it. The idea is to incrementally replace best efforts so that all traffic can have low delay and low loss, and also we can get rid of the scalable scaling blocks with TCP. And the aim is that it'll be so much better that it's going to get deployed because network operators see the value and they can build new products. Next.
Bob, you only have 2 minutes. Why don't you cut to what you're asking the working group to look at?
So the next. Right. The point is there's going to be a need for 3 types of standardization, but the one I want to talk about here is the thing to classify on so that we can get into the right queue. And this is a type of ECN. So what we're proposing is to use the ECT1 code point to do this. Next. The appendix of this draft looks at other possibilities. 3 are shown in this table. DSP plus ECN, ECN on its own, or ECT1, and the C code point as well, which I haven't got time to explain. The reasoning is all recorded in that appendix. There were 2 other possibilities that were quickly discounted. And so basically, we picked ECT1 plus CE because there's more green boxes. And next, yes, that'll do. We come on to the same point that Michael was worried about in RC 3168, but on the other side, the router behavior for drop has to be the same as marking, whereas Michael was talking about the host behavior has to be the same. Now, what we're proposing to do here is, because we want it to be radically different, we're proposing a new, we're not proposing to update 3168, we're proposing a new service. And in fact, in 3168 it said, we have decided to make these the same. However, this is a research issue, making it different, and as such, we've written this document. This is that research now, sort of 14 years on. Because making them the same meant ECN wasn't that good. So what we're proposing is a very clear statement in this grey box at the bottom that we will standardize the drop. If a packet is going to be dropped, it will be dropped with the square of the probability if it can be marked. Now, the square comes from the fact that all the older AQMs were designed around TCP square root, and it sort of undoes that square root. And then for the future, we get rid of that square and square root. And it gives you a lot more controllable system, which is why we get the very low delay. So I encourage you to read this. It's an 01 draft now, because we wrote it before the previous IETF, but didn't get a slot. So
Bob, is the next draft one that TSVWG should look at? Next slide. That one.
Yeah. So in the appendix it says choosing this will disallow or will preclude. One thing is it would obsolete the ECN nonce, and it says why, because there's other ways of doing it that have been found now. And also there's various research schemes that it would preclude, because we've only got one paper left essentially. So this is important to pick something, and we've been discussing what would be the best thing to do for that, and we want to widen that discussion. Right, and finally,
You want this next slide?
yeah.
Or next steps? Next steps. You want next steps, don't you?
Yeah.
You don't want that.
Yeah, we can. Well, no, the intended status, I'm going to have to say, that's at the moment it's experimental, but that could cause confusion. So I'd like a debate maybe on the list as to whether it ought to be proposed standard. But when I get review comments, please bear that in mind.
You can certainly talk about that on the list, but that's probably a bigger thing to consider than just talking about it on the list. So talk about it first.
Yep.
Please do. Next steps.
Please review. There was plenty of discussion when we first talked about this issue on the AQM list. It's been quiet since, so we assume that means everyone agrees.
No. But thanks for keeping roughly to time. We finished on schedule. All right, you want to see the last slide? It's for fun. And please don't ask comments on the last slide. No questions on the last slide. No comments. Okay. I'm afraid I have to close TSVWG at this point. Thank you all for coming. We hope to see you again. Please talk about the drafts on the list. Apologies from the chairs that we didn't manage to balance the agenda perfectly this time. We'll do a much better job next time. And look forward to seeing you all either in virtual land or at the next IETF meeting. You can keep that one up. What did you say?